Let's talk Candyman. Hey there guys, and welcome back to Dino Review. So last night I got to sit down and watch the newly released Candyman in cinemas. Of course, Candyman is a 2021 supernatural slasher film. It's directed by Nia DaCosta and it's actually written by Jordan Peele, Rosenfeld and DaCosta herself. Overall, I gotta say I did really enjoy this one. I have a hell of a lot of positives with it, but at the same time I do have a few negatives. The movie was brilliantly directed. There was a lot of great choices when it comes to characters and even the kill count itself, but there are a few issues I still have with it. But we are going to start with my positives, and honestly my first positive is just how faithful it is to the original movie. The movie is a very faithful continuation of the original story, so you could actually watch these movies back to back and get a complete story out of it. Now what was clever about the movie at the same time is if you hadn't seen the original movie, you could actually just follow the main character Anthony on his journey as he discovers who Candyman is and the whole history between Candyman and Cabrini Green. I thought that was quite clever. The new audience could pretty much come on board and find this stuff out along with that character. Now still, if you were a fan of the original movie, if you were a die-hard Candyman fan, there's a lot you'll enjoy with the Easter eggs that are in here and a lot of nods to the original film. I honestly loved bringing Cabrini Green back. I thought that was a great choice. It's just steeped in mythology and history when it comes to Candyman, so it just made a lot of sense. Of course, this movie though, it is based 30 years later, so a lot has changed in that time. A lot of those buildings have actually been knocked since then, but still it feels like the exact same location with the exact same themes they discussed in the original movie. Characters from the previous movie are also mentioned quite a lot, a hell of a lot more than I actually thought they would do. I honestly thought, although we were definitely getting characters back, it would be cameo roles and the story really would be loosely based on that first film, but it's actually not. They're quite intertwined, so as I said, that's why I would personally recommend watching the first one beforehand, but again, if you didn't, you can still go in and definitely enjoy the movie for what it is. Another positive is the directing in this movie. The movie is extremely well shot, just how certain scenes transition from shot to shot, and they're done in a way where you know the director had an exact vision in mind. Just the way kills are shown on screen. A lot of times we don't see Candyman. We might see a leg or we might see his hook or even his famous coat, but we don't actually see the kills take place, most of the time at least. And I actually like that. I think the way they did the directing in this movie, they focused a lot on mirrors. You would see people getting killed in a mirror, but you only see some of them. Instead, it was kind of left up to the audience to come up with what was happening on screen, which 9 times out of 10 is a hell of a lot scarier. As well as that, certain scenes would actually transition from shot to shot where you were constantly playing catch up with the camera. I thought that was great because it actually kept you on your toes. That was the same with the teams they were discussing throughout the movie. You were kind of constantly trying to catch up with what these people were talking about, and that kind of tailored off into the directing. The lighting as well is amazing in this movie, as is the sound design. When I came out of this movie, the first thing I actually said was I loved the sound design. You could hear pretty much everything crystal clear, but they all came at the right times. Anytime a bee was on screen, or multiple bees at that, you could literally feel them in your presence. I thought the sound design was perfect in the movie. The lighting, when it needed to be, was great, but the directing more than anything else, and particularly how they used mirrors, was a huge strong point in the film. The movie also tackles issues like racism and systemic injustices in a very clear and clever way. What I enjoyed, and in a sad way what I actually thought they portrayed quite well on screen, is the residents of Cabrini Green. Although they are in a much different situation in this movie, 30 years later they're still dealing with the exact same stuff. I thought that was quite interesting, just to kind of see the parallels between the first movie and this movie, and in a sad way how things really hadn't changed too much. Finally, my last positive is Candyman himself. I thought it was a great return to form for the character, because you got to remember Tony Todd is getting older as these movies go on, so it is harder to bring him back, and this movie is really there to reboot the franchise. And I thought they did a really good job of that, especially with the hive mind storyline. That made a lot of sense. and how they kind of talked about Candyman going through different generations with the exact same things unfortunately happening to each of these characters in different ways. As I said, how they portrayed Candyman on screen, you don't see a lot of his character. A lot of times it's pretty much in mirrors where you're trying to get a bit of him. But what I did enjoy is almost like the original Halloween, a lot of the times Candyman was in the background. You'd see his silhouette or you'd see his figure in the background, and that in itself was haunting. I thought that was a great way to reintroduce the character with a whole new plot point and also just building on the mythology of the character. Now on to my negatives. As I said, I did definitely enjoy this movie. There are a hell of a lot of positive things happening in the film, but there were still a few issues I had with it, and one in particular was honestly just the themes of the movie and how they were portrayed on screen. Looking at the original Candyman, they also go through themes of racial injustice, of systemic injustices in the black community, but it's actually told in a much different way. They use subtext and it actually relates quite a lot to the plot. With this one, what I found is the second we are introduced to these characters, they are talking about police brutality, gentrification, and just racial injustices that are happening around them. Now, although at the same time, I definitely think those issues should be shared on screen, it just came across as a little bit forced. Instead of kind of showing us what was happening, a lot of it was telling the audience. And it did kind of slow down the first half of the movie for sure. We didn't see a lot of Candyman, we didn't really see a lot of horror or a lot of scares at all. Instead, it was discussing these issues, but it was doing it a little bit too much where it came across as forced. If you look at the original Candyman, there is a scene with Helen Lyle where she gets attacked in a bathroom, and she pretty much points out that she is of course the first white woman who's been attacked in weeks, and the cops are there immediately. That one line, that one scene hits home to anybody that's watching it because we all know it's the truth. So I do wish these themes were maybe told in a more natural and progressive way, if there was a little bit more subtext in the movie than just pointing it out and showing you it. I think the movie did a great job of telling you these issues, but it didn't really show you a lot of it on screen at all. And as well as that, it didn't directly relate to Candyman. Even Anthony himself, as he goes through this whole journey, it doesn't really attach on to what they're actually talking about. Another negative I had with the film is definitely the runtime. I thought it was a little too short. As I said, the first half of the movie was a little slow getting to where they needed to go, and in the last maybe 20 to 25 minutes feels quite rushed. There's also a lot of characters where we go through their backstory and we kind of find out that these issues that are surrounding them relate a little bit to their past. But then when we get to the end of the movie, none of these storylines are actually resolved at all, and it's kind of left up to the audience to put two and two together. There's a huge twist at the end of the movie, and for me, I was quite confused when it first does happen. I didn't really get it at all, and I had to kind of think back afterwards and connect the dots. I didn't like that, and I actually just wish they either extended the movie out or actually just maybe put more into the finale. The finale just felt very rushed and very not like the rest of the movie. It was just very kind of chaotic and messy. Finally, and this is just my last negative, it is that the movie wasn't particularly scary. Now the movie, it is a 16 rating, so going into it I kind of had a feeling maybe it won't have the best jump scares like the original, but I do just wish it was a little bit more of a horror movie. It's definitely horror in a lot of aspects, but I think the jump scares and the slasher of it just wasn't there. Now a lot of that might be down to not seeing a lot of it on screen. We don't really see the kills in this movie, but still there are 2 or 3 points of the original film that are still effective today with jump scares. So I do wish they harkened a little bit more back to that horror aspect of the movie, but again, these are small negatives. I think overall the movie was absolutely brilliant. I think the themes that they discussed, they did it quite well. The directing, in my opinion, is absolutely gorgeous, and the sound design is one of the best sound design I've seen in a movie in years. So I do think the movie is a great movie. There was just a few moments I was disappointed. As I said, I just wish there was a little bit more Candyman in it. I wish we kind of knew who the character was of Candyman like we did in that first movie, and I just wish they kind of upped the horror ante a little bit more. But guys, have you seen Candyman? If you did, what did you think of it? Were you a big fan of this one, or was it a complete failure in your eyes? Make sure guys you let me know in the comments. I am dying to know what everyone thinks of the new Candyman, and do you want to see a sequel? As always guys, remember you can of course subscribe to the channel. If you want to see more reviews like this one with new releases, let me know in the comments down below. And if you like this video, if you want to see more videos like this, you can click any of those links down below, and I will see you guys in the next one.